My adopted brother is actually my biological father, seeking a second chance life. It's funny, the things you tell yourself to keep breathing. Like how I've been telling myself for years that it was all just a story, a twisted fairy tale my own mother spun before she checked out. But the older I get, the more those threads start to unravel, and the tighter the knot gets in my stomach. It started small, like a persistent itch under the skin, something you can ignore until you can't. I was maybe 8, 9 years old when my mom first told me about Leo. He was this older kid, she said, someone she'd known a long time, someone who'd had a rough go of it and needed a stable home. She made it sound like a noble sacrifice on her part, taking him in when no one else would. And I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Leo became my big brother. Not just a brother, but the brother. The one who'd teach me how to ride my bike without training wheels, even though he was way too cool for scraped knees and tearful afternoons. The one who'd sneak me beers from the back of the fridge when mom wasn't looking. The kind of stuff that made you feel like you were finally part of the grown-up world. He was always around, a fixture. He lived with us practically. Mom's apartment was small, a cramped 2-bedroom in a decent but not exactly glamorous part of town. The kind of place with thin walls where you could hear your neighbors arguing about money or the TV. Leo had the second bedroom, the one that used to be a guest room but mostly became his storage unit. He'd crash on the couch sometimes, especially after a late night. It was just normal. Leo was just part of the furniture. And if you're feeling this story, if it's hitting you somewhere deep, please do me a favor. Hit that like button. And while you're at it, if you want to hear the rest of this messed up tale, subscribe to the channel. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single agonizing detail. And hey, if you've got thoughts, questions, whatever, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. Your engagement genuinely helps me keep sharing these stories. Leo was a few years older, maybe 5 or 6. He had this wild, dark hair that always looked like he'd just rolled out of bed or wrestled a hurricane. And eyes, man, his eyes. They were this deep, stormy blue, the kind that could either make you feel like you were the only person in the world or make you feel like you were about to be swallowed whole. He was moody, unpredictable. One minute he'd be cracking jokes, roughhousing with me, making me laugh until my sides hurt. The next, he'd be withdrawn, a dark cloud hanging over him, staring out the window like he was lost in some private war. Mom always said he had a difficult past, that he'd been through a lot. She was a soft touch, my mom, always seeing the good in people, even when it was buried under layers of dirt and regret. She'd always talk about Leo like he was her project, her unfinished symphony. I just saw him as Leo, my brother. Things were okay for a long time. We weren't exactly living the high life, you know. Mom worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices downtown and then waiting tables at a diner that smelled permanently of stale coffee and fried onions. I'd do my homework at the kitchen table while she prepped for her second shift, the clatter of plates and distant traffic a constant soundtrack. Leo, he was always drifting. He'd have these phases where he'd be really into something, cars, music, trying to be some kind of artist. He'd spend hours hunched over a sketchbook or fiddling with old car parts he'd scavenged from the junkyard down the road. Then he'd just abandon it, move on to the next thing, leaving a trail of half-finished projects in his wake. Mom would sigh, but she never really got on him. She just kept working, kept providing, kept this fragile semblance of normalcy for us. I remember this one summer, I must have been about 12. Leo was 17, already out of high school and working odd jobs. He got this beat-up Ford pickup, cherry red, and spent weeks tinkering with it in the parking lot behind our apartment building. He'd let me help, which usually meant handing him wrenches or holding a flashlight while he sweated under the hood. He'd tell me about engines, about how they worked, his voice rough and gravelly but excited. He even let me sit in the driver's seat once, just to feel the rumble of the engine when he turned it on. It felt powerful, like a secret handshake with the adult world. That truck became his escape, his freedom. He'd disappear for days sometimes, just him and that truck, heading wherever the road took him. Mom always worrying, always waiting up. But even back then, there were whispers. Not spoken, not out loud, but the kind of things you pick up on as a kid. Little things. My mom's friends, the ones who'd come over for cheap wine and gossip on Friday nights, they'd sometimes glance at Leo and then at my mom, a shared look of something I couldn't quite decipher. It was a flicker of something knowing, a subtle exchange that always left me feeling a little uneasy. My mom, she had this way of brushing off questions,
subject with a bright, almost forced smile. "Oh, Leo's just complicated," she'd say, her eyes not quite meeting mine. The real crack, the one that started to widen into a chasm, came when I was 16. I was a typical teenager, obsessed with video games, trying to figure out girls, the usual. Leo, he was still around, but he'd become more of a phantom. He'd come and go, sometimes crashing on the couch for a week, sometimes disappearing for months. He'd be working some hustle, always something that sounded a little sketchy, always a little bit of cash, but never anything stable. Mom was getting older, her hands starting to shake a little when she poured coffee, her back always a little hunched. The weight of it all was starting to show. One night, I came home from a friend's house, later than I was supposed to. The apartment was dark, quiet. I figured Mom was already asleep. I walked into the living room, and there she was, sitting on the couch, bathed in the pale moonlight streaming through the window. She wasn't sleeping. She was crying, not sobbing, but this quiet, heartbroken weeping that twisted my gut. And Leo was there, sitting beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his face etched with a strange mixture of anger and protectiveness. It was a look I'd never seen on him before. He was usually so detached, so self-contained, but he was holding my mom like she was made of glass. I froze in the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't want to intrude, but I also couldn't just walk away. He looked up then, his stormy blue eyes meeting mine. There was a flash of something, surprise, maybe even guilt, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by that familiar, guarded expression. "Hey," he said, his voice low. Mom flinched, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Oh, honey, you're home late," she said, her voice raspy. I walked over, feeling like an intruder in my own home. "What's wrong?" I asked, looking from him to her. Mom gave a weak smile. "Nothing, sweetie, just mom stuff." Leo just stared at me. He didn't say anything, but his eyes, they were intense, like he was trying to tell me something without words. Something heavy.
"Leo," Mom said, her voice a little stronger, "maybe you should go for a drive. Clear your head." He didn't argue. He just stood up, a slight nod to me, and then he was out the door, the sound of his truck's engine fading into the night. I sat down next to Mom. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her body trembling slightly. "He's a good kid, you know," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Underneath it all, he's got a good heart." I didn't know what to say. I was confused. The image of Leo holding my mom, his fierce protectiveness, it didn't fit with the drifting, detached guy I thought I knew. That was the beginning of the end, I guess. The cracks started to show more. The facade began to crumble. Leo became even more erratic. He'd show up at odd hours, sometimes agitated, sometimes with this strange, almost manic energy. He'd ask Mom questions about the past, about my dad. My dad? He died when I was too young to remember him. A car accident. That's what Mom always said. A clean, tragic story. One afternoon, I was looking for a book in Mom's closet, a rare occurrence. I moved a stack of old photo albums, and behind them, tucked away in a corner, I found a shoebox. It was old, worn, the kind you'd keep old shoes in. Curiosity, that ever-present demon, got the better of me. I opened it. Inside were letters. Old, yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon, and a small, worn-out teddy bear, a little brown thing missing an eye. I recognized the bear. It was mine, from when I was a baby. My hands were shaking as I untied the ribbon. The letters were from my mom, addressed to someone named Daniel. They were full of longing, of love, of desperation. And then, tucked in between them, I found something else. A photograph. It was older, grainy, probably from the late 80s or early 90s. My mom was in it, younger, radiant, her hair darker, her smile wide and genuine. And next to her, with his arms slung around her shoulders, was a young man with wild dark hair and those unforgettable stormy blue eyes. It was Leo, but he looked different. Younger, of course, but also softer, happier. And in the crook of my mom's other arm, a tiny baby, swaddled tight. Me. My breath hitched. My entire world tilted on its axis. I flipped the photo over. Scrawled in Mom's familiar handwriting were 3 words. My Daniel and me. Daniel. Not my dad's name. My dad's name was Robert. Robert Miller. Everyone knew that. I sat there, in the dusty darkness of the closet, the photo clutched in my trembling hand,
words of my mother's letters echoing in my head, and I looked at the face of the young man in the picture, the face of the adopted brother who lived with us, who taught me to ride my bike, who held my mother's hand in the moonlight. The face that, in that moment, I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone was my father. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air out of my lungs. The man I called brother, the man who'd always been a part of my life, was the man who'd fathered me. And suddenly, all those whispers, all those knowing glances, all the years of Mom's evasiveness, it all clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. My mother hadn't taken Leo in. She hadn't given him a home. She had given him a life she thought was the best she could offer him, a life that kept him close, a life that kept him from knowing the truth. Or maybe, a life that kept me from knowing it. The comfort I'd always taken in Leo's presence, the easy camaraderie we sometimes shared, the anger and confusion I'd felt in his presence, it all suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. He wasn't just an adopted brother. He was a ghost of a past I never knew I had, a past that was staring me right in the face from a faded photograph. And the real question, the one that clawed at my throat, was why? Why all the lies? Why this elaborate charade? And what was Leo doing, still here, years later, watching it all unfold? The answer, I suspected, was far more complicated and far more painful than I could possibly imagine. The air in the closet felt thick, suffocating. I held the photo, my fingers tracing the faded image of Mom and the young man with the storm blue eyes. Daniel, not Robert. The words on the back, my Daniel and me, felt like a brand seared onto my soul. I tried to breathe, to push down the panic that was rising, hot and acrid in my throat. This wasn't some abstract concept. This was real. This was Leo. The Leo who'd taught me how to skip stones at the lake. The Leo who'd blasted punk rock in his beat-up truck. The Leo who'd held my mom's hand like a lifeline. He was my father, my adopted brother, my biological father. The words jumbled in my head, refusing to form coherent thoughts. It was like trying to assemble a shattered mirror, each shard reflecting a distorted piece of the truth. I scrambled out of the closet, the shoebox clutched to my chest like a shield. The late afternoon sun, usually a comforting presence, now felt harsh and accusatory, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, mocking spirits. Mom wasn't home. She was probably still at work, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in my reality. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, but who? My best friend, Mike? He'd think I was crazy. My Aunt Carol, Mom's sister? She was a distant figure, someone we saw at holidays. Her smile's always a little too tight, her eyes always a little too knowing. I sank onto the one sofa, the familiar floral pattern suddenly alien. I opened the shoebox again, pulling out the letters. Mom's looping script, a stark contrast to the hurried scrawl on the back of the photograph, flowed across the pages. They were written years ago, before I was born. Each word dripped with a love that felt both desperate and fierce. She wrote about their stolen moments, about the fear of judgment, about the hope for a future that seemed impossibly out of reach. There were lines about keeping our secrets safe, about protecting you both, and a recurring phrase that sent shivers down my spine. Daniel, you have to understand, it's for the best. For the best. What was for the best? Hiding me, hiding him, hiding us. The teddy bear, my old one-eyed companion, lay nestled amongst the letters. I picked it up, its worn fur familiar against my fingers. Mom had always kept this bear, tucked away somewhere safe. She had told me it was just a cherished childhood toy, a memory. But now, seeing it in the context of these letters, seeing it alongside the photo of Leo and my mother, it felt like a tangible link to a past I'd never known existed, a past that involved the man I'd called my brother. A wave of nausea washed over me. I'd lived my entire life under a carefully constructed lie. Every interaction with Leo, every shared laugh, every argument, every moment of his quiet presence in our small apartment, it was all tainted. Was he aware? Did he know he was my father? The image of him holding Mom that night, his face a mask of anger and protectiveness, flashed in my mind. Was that the look of a brother comforting his sister? or a father wrestling with his own complicated paternity. I spent the next few hours in a daze, replaying fragments of memories, searching for clues I'd somehow missed. Leo's occasional disappearances, his guarded demeanor, his restless energy, his almost palpable frustration with the world.
It all seemed to fall into place now. A puzzle I'd been too young, too innocent to solve. Mom had kept him close, not as a son, but as... what? A companion? A reminder? A way to keep him tethered to the life he'd forfeited? Or maybe, just maybe, a way to protect me from the harsh reality of my conception. A reality she herself couldn't bear to confront. The sound of Mom's car pulling into the driveway jolted me back to the present. I shoved the shoebox under the couch cushion, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I plastered a neutral expression on my face as she walked in, her usual tired smile in place. "Hey, honey, long day?" she asked, kicking off her sensible work shoes. "Yeah, same old," I managed, my voice sounding unnaturally strained. She went to the kitchen to start dinner, the familiar clatter of pots and pans a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. I watched her every movement, trying to reconcile the image of this woman, my mother, with the desperate lover writing those letters. She seemed so ordinary, so grounded. How could she have harbored such a monumental secret for so long? Later that evening, Leo showed up. It was rare for him to just drop by unannounced anymore. He'd usually call first, or Mom would mention he was coming over. He stood in the doorway, that familiar wild hair, those piercing blue eyes, but now they seemed to hold a different weight, a deeper sadness. "Hey, man," he said, his voice a little rumbled. He glanced at Mom, then at me. "Thought I'd see what was up." Mom smiled, a little too brightly. "Leo, what a nice surprise. Come on in." He stepped inside, his presence filling the small apartment, as it always had. But tonight, it felt different, loaded. Every casual gesture, every word felt like it was being scrutinized by my newly awakened awareness. He was talking about some job he'd heard about, something out of state, but his eyes kept drifting to me. There was a flicker of something in them, a question, a plea, a resignation. "So, you heading out again?" Mom asked, her tone casual, but her hands, I noticed, were fiddling with the dish towel. Leo shrugged, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe, thinking about it." He looked at me directly then. "Need a change of scenery, you know?" My gut clenched. Change of scenery. Was he running? Or was he leaving because the truth was becoming too much to bear? For him, for me, for Mom? "What about you?" he asked, his voice softer now, directed at me. "You okay? You've been quiet." I couldn't hold it in any longer. The weight of the secret, the confusion, the simmering rage, it was all too much. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "No, Leo," I said, my voice trembling with a force I didn't recognize. "I'm not okay, and you know why." Mom froze, her eyes wide, darting between Leo and me. The dish towel slipped from her fingers, landing silently on the floor. Leo's expression shifted. The guardedness was still there, but underneath it, something else flickered. A dawning realization, a confirmation of his worst fears. His stormy blue eyes, the eyes I now knew were my father's eyes, locked onto mine. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, thick and suffocating. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice dangerously low, but there was no denial in it, no surprise, just a deep, bone-weary dread. "I found them," I spat out, my voice cracking. "The letters, the photograph, the one with you and Mom, the one that says, 'My Daniel and me.'" Mom let out a choked gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes, mirroring the ones I'd seen on her face that night in the moonlight. Leo didn't move. He just stood there, his gaze unwavering, a statue carved from regret. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, punctuated only by Mom's shallow breaths. The truth, the one Mom had so desperately tried to bury, was out, and it was uglier, more devastating than I could have ever imagined. Then Leo spoke, his voice barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of years of unspoken pain. "You weren't supposed to find those. She swore she'd kept them safe." He looked at Mom, a flicker of anger finally breaking through the resignation. "You told me she burned them." Mom's shoulders slumped. She was a broken woman, caught in the crosshairs of her own making. I couldn't," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. "They were all I had left of us. Us. Not me and my son. Us. Daniel and her. It was all about Daniel, about Leo, about the life they'd lost. And I, their son, had been a secret, a consequence, a living reminder of a love that had defied convention, a love that had shattered their worlds. So, what now?" Leo's voice was rough, strained. He looked from Mom
Mom to me, his eyes bleeding for an answer he knew I didn't have. The question hung in the air, unanswered, leaving me with a chilling realization. The story wasn't over. It had just taken a turn into a darkness I couldn't yet comprehend. The man who had been my brother, my father, was looking at me with a desperation that mirrored my own confusion. He had a second chance, yes, but what did that mean for me, for us? Was this the beginning of a new family, or the final unraveling of the one I thought I knew? The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever anticipated, leaving me adrift in a sea of unanswered questions and the crushing weight of a family tree that had just imploded. And then, in the suffocating silence, Leo spoke again, his voice laced with a fear I hadn't heard before. She doesn't know the whole story, does she? About why I had to leave. Not all of it. He looked directly at me, his gaze piercing, a new kind of dread settling in my chest. There's more to this than just letters, man. A lot more. And Mom is in more danger than she realizes. The words hung between us, heavy, suffocating. More danger, I echoed, my voice thin, reedy. The world tilted on its axis, the carefully constructed scaffolding of my reality crumbling around me. Mom, caught between Leo and me, looked like she had aged 10 years in the span of 10 minutes. Her face, usually so full of life, even in its weariness, was now a mask of pure terror. Leo's stormy blue eyes, my father's eyes, were fixed on mine, but I could see past the fear, past the regret, to a raw, primal alarm. He was talking about Mom, but the way he looked at me, it was like he was talking through me, to someone else, someone who needed to be warned. She thinks it was just a crush, a teenage mistake that got out of hand, that she was protecting me, protecting you, he said, his voice rough, guttural. She doesn't know. She doesn't know the kind of people I got involved with, the kind of messes I was trying to get out of. She doesn't know what I did. My head spun. What did he do? What kind of messes was he talking about? This wasn't some dramatic movie. This was my life, my mother, my father, the man I'd known as my brother. Leo, what are you saying? What people? What messes? My voice was a desperate plea, a child begging for answers from an adult who suddenly seemed too broken to provide them. Mom finally found her voice, a weak, trembling sound. Daniel, please, you don't understand. It was so long ago. I was so young. He was so desperate, and I loved him. I thought. Her voice trailed off, swallowed by the enormity of it all.
Leo turned to her, his face etched with a pain so deep it made me flinch. Loved me? Or loved the idea of me? The bad boy you thought you could save. He raked a hand that was already disheveled hair, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. You didn't save me, Mom. You made it worse. You made me think there was something worth saving, and then you let me go. And then you kept the evidence, and now they might be coming back. Who's coming back? I demanded, stepping forward, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. The confusion was morphing into a cold, hard anger. I'd been lied to my entire life by both of them, and now my father, this man I was just discovering, was telling me my mother was in danger. Who the hell are they, Leo? He flinched at the name. It's complicated. Back then, I was in deep, really deep. People owe me money, man. People I crossed. People who don't forget. People who collect. He looked at Mom, his eyes burning into hers. When I had to run, I thought I left it all behind. The debt, the damage I'd done to get out of it. But if she kept those letters, if she kept that photo, it could be traced back. It could lead them right to her, right to you. The implication hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just talking about financial trouble. He was talking about people who would hunt you down, people who would hurt you, people who would hurt Mom. The image of Mom, so frail and terrified, standing between us, flashed in my mind. The anger roared with a sudden, overwhelming surge of protectiveness. What did you do, Leo? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. What exactly did you do that made people want to collect? He swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the worn rug beneath his feet. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, each second an eternity. Mom watched him, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin white line. Finally, he looked up, his eyes filled with a desolation I'd never seen before. It was a deal, he said, his voice barely audible. A bad one. I was young.
figured if I disappeared, if I went completely off the grid, they'd forget, or they'd find someone else to blame. Someone got hurt, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Who? Who did you hurt, Leo? He wouldn't meet my eyes. A guy, an innocent bystander. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, got caught in the crossfire. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And the people I was working for, they're not the forgiving kind. They move in circles, they have contacts, and if they think someone knows something, or if they think someone owes them, they find them, no matter how long it takes. My mind reeled. This was the man who taught me how to ride a bike, the man who'd played video games with me for hours, the man who'd held Mom when she cried. He was capable of this. The betrayal was a physical ache in my chest, a hollow emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. And Mom, she doesn't know any of this, does she? I asked, my voice tight with accusation. She thinks you just ran off because of her, because of us. Leo's gaze was fixed on Mom again, a flicker of something akin to agony crossing his features. She knows some of it, the debts, the trouble, but not the extent of it, not the violence. I never wanted her to know. I thought keeping her safe meant keeping her ignorant. He looked back at me, his expression shifting, a grim determination hardening his features. But now if those letters are out there, it's not just me they're looking for, it's anyone connected to me, and she's the most connected. Mom finally broke, her sobs racking her body. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I never imagined. You never imagined? I shot back, my voice rising. You never imagined that the man you loved, the father of your child, might have been involved in something dangerous? You never imagined that keeping him close, keeping me a secret, might put us all at risk? Did you even think about me, about my life? Or was it just about your twisted, forbidden love story? The words were cruel, brutal, but they poured out of me, raw and unchecked. I couldn't stop them. The hurt, the confusion, the sheer magnitude of the deception, it was all too much to contain. Leo reached out, his hand hovering in the air between us, not quite touching me. Hey man, it wasn't like that. She was trying to protect you, trying to protect me. We were both just kids, trying to survive. And I screwed up royally. I made choices I regret every single day of my life. He looked down at his hands, calloused and weathered, hands that had likely done things I couldn't even begin to fathom. But I'm not that person anymore. I've been living with the consequences for years, and if they're coming for Mom, I'll do anything to stop them. Anything? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. What does that even mean, Leo? What can you possibly do? He took a deep breath, his chest expanding. I know people who can help, people who owe me, and I know the people who are after us. I know their patterns, I know their weaknesses. His eyes met mine again, and this time there was a raw honesty, a desperate plea for understanding. I can't undo what I did, I can't erase the past, but I can try to fix this. I can try to keep you and Mom safe, but I can't do it alone, not anymore. The weight of his words settled on me, heavy and suffocating. My brother, my father, a man with a dangerous past, asking for my help. My mother, the woman who had always been my anchor, now a victim of a secret she desperately tried to bury. And me, caught in the middle, my life irrevocably altered by a truth I never wanted to uncover. You want my help? I asked, my voice hollow. After everything, after lying to me my whole life, after putting Mom in danger. Leo flinched, but he didn't back down. I know it's a lot to ask, more than a lot, but I'm your father, man, and she's your mother. And if there's any chance of saving them, of saving us, I have to try. I owe you that much. I owe Mom that much. I looked at Mom. Her face was wet with tears, her body trembling. She looked broken, lost, a shadow of the strong woman I'd always known. And then I looked at Leo, the man with my father's eyes, a stranger, and yet terrifyingly familiar. He was flawed, deeply flawed, but there was a flicker of genuine remorse, a desperate need to atone. The anger, the betrayal, it was still there, a burning ember in my gut, but beneath it, something else was stirring, a sense of responsibility, a grim, terrifying understanding of the situation. My family, fractured and broken, was in danger, and if there was a way to fix it, to protect them, even with the man who had deceived us at the center of it all, maybe I had to consider it. What do you need me to do? I asked. My voice was hollow, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. Leo's shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. A small, almost imperceptible nod. Just trust me. For now, just let me try to explain.
Let me tell you everything. And then we figure it out. Together. He began to speak, his voice low and steady, the words flowing out like a confession. He told me about the desperation, the fear, the bad choices. He told me about the people he'd crossed, the deals he'd made, the life he'd lived on his own. He spoke of regret, of a crushing loneliness, of a constant fear of being found. And as he spoke, I saw not just the man who had lied to me, but the man who had suffered, the man who had made terrible mistakes, and was now trying, in his own broken way, to make amends. Mom listened, her sobs subsiding, replaced by a quiet, stoic grief. She reached out, her hand trembling, and placed it on Leo's arm. He didn't pull away. Instead, he covered her hand with his stormy blue eyes meeting hers, a silent acknowledgement of the years of pain, the years of separation, the years of shared secrets. The air in the apartment was still thick, still heavy, but now it was laced with a fragile hope, a desperate understanding. The truth was out. The lies had been exposed. And while the damage was done and the scars would undoubtedly remain, there was a possibility, however slim, of rebuilding. Of finding a new kind of family, forged not in innocence, but in the crucible of shared pain and a desperate fight for survival. They're looking for proof, Leo said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Anything that connects me to this city, to this life. Those letters, they're a direct link. If they find them, they'll know where to look. They'll know Mom is here. And then, he trailed off, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the silence. We need to get rid of them, all of them, safely. And then we need to disappear, all three of us, for a while at least, until it's over. My gaze fell to the shoebox peeking out from under the couch cushion, the evidence, the catalyst for this entire unraveling. It felt like a bomb, ticking, waiting to explode. I'll get them, I said, my voice firm. The anger was still there, a dull ache, but it was tempered by a newfound resolve. This was my family, messed up and broken as it was, and I wasn't going to let anyone hurt them, not anymore, not ever again. I walked over to the couch, my movements deliberate, controlled. I reached under the cushion and pulled out the shoebox. It felt heavier now, charged with a dangerous energy. I looked at Leo, at Mom. They were watching me, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Where do we take them? I asked, my gaze steady. Leo looked at Mom, then back at me. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. There's a place, out past the old quarry, a deep well. Nobody goes there anymore. And so, under the cover of a bruised twilight sky, we drove. Leo in the passenger seat, his gaze sweeping the darkening roads, his hand never far from the door handle. Mom in the back, her face illuminated by the dashboard lights, her eyes closed, as if trying to shut out the reality of the journey. And me, behind the wheel, the shoebox of secrets and lies at my feet, my heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Guilt, anger, a nascent love, a terrifying responsibility. We reached the quarry, a gaping maw in the earth, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The well was an ominous black hole, shrouded in an eerie silence. Leo held a flashlight, its beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. Ready? He asked, his voice tight. I nodded, my throat dry. He opened the shoebox. The letters, the photograph, the worn teddy bear, the remnants of a love story, a deception, a life I never knew. One by one, he lifted them, the flashlight beam illuminating the faded ink, the smiling faces, the tangible proof of our shared, complicated past. He held them for a moment, a silent farewell, then dropped them into the black abyss. The sound of them hitting the water, or whatever lay at the bottom, was a dull thud, a final punctuation mark on a chapter I never wanted to read. We stood there for a long moment, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets. The secrets were gone, buried. But the truth, the raw, painful truth, remained. It was etched into our faces, into the lines around our eyes, into the very air we breathed. As we drove away, the quarry receding in the rearview mirror, I looked at Leo. He was watching the road, his jaw set, but his eyes held a newfound peace. Mom, in the back, had a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, but there was no trace of the abject terror from before, just a quiet, weary acceptance. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and unanswered questions. We had to disappear, to lay low, to start over. But as the city lights grew fainter in the distance, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The confusion was still there, the lingering sting of betrayal,
but it was no longer all-consuming. The truth, however devastating, had set us free. Free from the lies, free from the secrets. Free to face whatever came next, together. My past had imploded, but in its wreckage, something new, something fragile, was beginning to form. A twisted, complicated family, bound not by blood alone, but by the shared experience of surviving the darkest truths. The road stretched out before us, a long, dark ribbon of asphalt leading into the unknown. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt like I was finally heading in the right direction.